Okay, so this should be a little bit more exciting than the last video, which, I mean, most of what I'm doing on this series is really just making UIs that do stuff, but here we're going to be making a column-based file browser, and I've made this kind of thing quite a few times, but this one, I'm going to be doing it a little bit differently than I normally do, which, I mean, as far as this series goes, it doesn't mean anything. So here, just like adding a little helper function to recursively go through and remove all of the elements of a layout, so you can feed it a layout and it just pulls everything off from the bottom up, because in Qt you can't get rid of stuff from top down if it has children, and then deleting it. Anyways, this will be like a thing that we can place inside of other UIs that will have columns that have like lists of things, and primarily we're going to be using this for traversing directories, so you can like choose the folder or the item in the folder that you want, and it'll have like a search function and stuff like that. And we can place these out on like a horizontal box, and then that whole horizontal box we can place in different spots of various widgets that we want, so that way then we can make like an animation browser, an asset browser, and we can make an asset browser for Maya and an asset browser for Unreal or whatever we need. And yeah, so specifically, I'm going to be making the kind of agnostic template parent class that you can create from. And that's how I do like most of my work, which is really just like a reusable thing, but I know some people kind of don't like. There's a fine line, I think, between doing too much abstraction and too little, and because you want things to be reusable, but you don't want like a huge inheritance tree and components everywhere, and I largely work object oriented, so you kind of just need to make sure on that. And specifically here, the columns are going to be one class. The browser that manages the columns is going to be a separate class, but the column that I'm using for this kind of column manager is a layer in between specific to that, so that way then you can have some communication back and forth. And really is just I might be kind of overdoing this, but this is just because, like I said, I've done this a few times before, and this number of components I kind of like. Although, as far as implementing it into like a full deployable UI, that I'm trying something different, which is normally in the past I would have me or another dev inherit from the browser, and then they just kind of place the horizontal box wherever they want and extend it, hook up buttons and hook up functions. And really the only thing that they're getting from the inheritance is just that it automatically makes this column manager. But in this implementation, I'm specifically making it that you have your widget, and your widget has to instantiate the column manager as a separate object and keep track of it. And I don't know if that's better or worse, but whatever. I'm going to try it, you know. I've done this several times, and this is like me. Most of these videos were recorded in like a week, so I'm kind of just like speed running an asset pipeline from Maya to Unreal at this point, and I figure why not just try a couple different things, and I may come back through and redo stuff. For example, like later on we use the, well, okay, I guess it's not true. I was going to say that we use this for the Maya tools, but really we just use it for the Maya browser, which doesn't really matter. Some of the stuff here, like in the publishing, the Maya asset publisher that I make later, I don't really take into account version padding, and maybe I will want that as a pipeline setting later, but I'm not going to worry about it for now. So there's definitely some refactorability, all of which is, I believe, pretty minor, that I could go through and redo on most of these. Anyway, so the idea of this is that there's some class that you feed it a list, and it'll instantiate that list. It'll instantiate one of these kind of columns for every item in that list, and if you want to make a fixed browser, and then the functions here you can like keep adding to the right if you want, or make another one. We just use this list to add columns to the right of the previous column, and you can dynamically add them too if you didn't want the columns to be fixed, because maybe you weren't sure how deep the tree is that you flashbang, how deep the tree is that you want your user to go through. But for my stuff, I'm largely working in a fixed directory structure, so I don't really care about that, but at least I have that option. But yeah, it's a class that manages the columns, and then we basically just have the columns. Whenever you click an item, it reports back, this is my ID number, and here's the item that was selected. So here I'm going through and making an example version. And then from there, the manager would take that data and do whatever it needs to. And the private column listener method is what gets ran whenever one of these columns gets clicked. And then from there, we can kind of build logic to populate the adjacent columns based on whatever we want. There's a little bit of fumbling through this because, again, I haven't normally, in the few times that I've made this, I haven't broken it into two different classes. And so that was a little bit of just something different that I have to get over in this. And specifically, the reason why I'm doing that is because I've ran into some issues with Q main windows versus Q widgets. And if you want to inherit from this browser thing to just make a main window, then the browser kind of needs to be a main window. Otherwise, if you just want to place it as a component in another thing, you'd want it to be a widget, and those come with some trade-offs. And so here, normally I do it as a main window, but here I'm doing it as a widget component instead and trying it out. And the column action function is one that you have to override in whatever class that you end up making. The column listener is the thing that runs when the columns, you click on a column and then it tells the manager, hey, run your column listener function. The column listener function runs a couple different things and the column action function, and that's the one that you kind of redefine based on whatever you want. And that's how you do your path handling there. And also, I think I ran into an issue where I forgot to add it to my widget like an idiot. And so I kind of go back and forth. And I remember as I was recording this, I was like, oh my God, I can't figure it out. And I'm recording. I'm going to look like an idiot. But yeah, then I realized, oh, wait a minute, I haven't actually put the columns in. But yeah, specifically the column action function needs to be something that we can override on each of our derived classes, because there are different paths that we care about for browsers. If it's an asset browser, we probably don't need the user to choose whatever the folder is that delineates between assets and animations. So we could make that a fixed value and just not show that to the user. And so by having that overridable function, you can kind of just give the user or the developer a way to make various path-based management, like right here. And that's basically it being shown. And at this point, after working with it, I'm just thinking about things that I might want on various stuff that I would implement this with. So I added that quick property to easily get the selected item. And then I think at this point, I'm just going through and docstringing everything. I usually pretty aggressively docstring stuff because I don't want to trust future me. Future me probably isn't going to get it. You work on something on Friday and say, there, it's perfect. And then Monday morning you come in and say, you know what? God and I knew how this worked on Friday, but now only God knows.